investigation. US President Donald Trump has also expressed concerns about the journalist's disappearance. Turkish authorities believe Khashoggi was killed at the consulate as a result of his outspoken
case. Israel enacted a law last year banning any foreigner who knowingly issues a public call for boycotting Israel. An Israeli
And you're listening to KZSC 88.1 FM. I'm Bruce Bratton. I host Universal Grapevine. I'll be hosting it in a minute or two. First, a couple of special announcements. KZSC thanks Bookshop Santa Cruz for supporting local community radio. Bookshop Santa Cruz is a local independent bookseller that carries a wide selection of books, cards, calendars, and gifts for readers of any age. And they also offer shipping with a direct-to-home service. And special attractions coming up in this part of October. Sunday, October 21st, off-site event. Matt De La Pena and Christian Robinson will be on stage there 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock on Sunday the 21st. And another off-site ticketed event, Marcus Zuzak and his book Bridge of Clay at 7 o'clock Thursday, October 25th. That's all happening at the Bookshop Santa Cruz, which is, as most of you should have memorized by now, located at 1520 Pacific Avenue in downtown Santa Cruz. And their phone number is 831-423-0900 or online at bookshopsantacruz.com. And the FCC requests that I tell you, as a non-commercial educational radio station, KZSC supports free expression of ideas. Please be aware that the opinions expressed are those of the speakers or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of the UC Regents, KZSC staff, management, or underwriters. We welcome your feedback on our programming. Please direct your comments to the Program Review Committee by calling 831-459-4726 or emailing prc@kzsc.org. My program tonight, Universal Grapevine, for the first half hour, Sean Van Summeren is here right now, and he's Executive Director of the Pelagic Shark Research Foundation. We're going to hear more about that. And then the second half hour, Hina Pendle will be coming in, and she is the founding principal and executive director of US Partners. She's going to be talking about some new ideas and ways to use our personal power. But right now, welcome back, Sean Van Summeren. Hi there.
Hi, Bruce. How you doing?
I'm doing just fine.
Good
Fine. And Pelagic Shark Research Fund. You know what I had to do? Even though you've been here before and I've known you for years, I had to look up pelagic. I wasn't sure what it meant. What does it mean?
It's an archaic Greek word in origin. It basically refers to fully most of the Earth's surface. So it's one of those, obscure things that, most people, don't know or it's used by biologists quite a bit, pelagic birds, fish species, things pertaining to the open ocean.
What I got out of it, means pelagic means living in the open sea and not coastal or inland waters. That's pretty specific.
Or specialized, albatross, shearwaters, all those are pelagic birds. A lot of the fish, tunas, they have a coastal phase as well as the open ocean, deep sea environment, especially with juveniles in the case of sharks.
I see. Okay, now, Pelagic Shark Research Foundation, that's you. You started it. 1990, was it?
1990, yeah. We were the world's first shark-specific conservation advocacy and then, research group. That was our main method. At the time when we founded, a lot of the issues were sort of in holding pattern due to lack of data. A lot of these were data-deficient species like basking sharks, white sharks. There was no baseline, basically.
Right.
And so within 5-6 years, we had white sharks as a protected species, first species of protected shark in the country. We also succeeded in getting that accomplished based on the perception, and I'm convinced that they're important enough to the environment to protect, rather than going through the initial process. It was like, well, are they endangered or not? Therefore, we can protect them. It's like, well, let's just protect them because we like them. Preventative, rather than wait till maybe it's a question, or in the case of the basking shark, they're definitely endangered.
But before you go on and on and on, tell us, what do you do? Start off a day. What do you do with the boat?
It's seasonal. These days,
Where's the boat docked?
Well, we've got another boat coming down from up north.
Where's the other? What do you mean another boat?
Yeah, there's more than one, and it depends on the time of
Tell
year
us
in
about
terms of what
how
a
many
daily
are
day.
there.
Today, for example, an average day for the last couple of weeks has been, ball peening off rust and repainting one of the vessels. It's a boat we use offshore, looking for basking sharks, periodically. I've also got 2 fast boats, rubber boats, that we've been using for the past, 12 years, outboard motors. And then we've got a good partnership with the Capitola Wharf. They've got skiffs there. I've worked there in the past and been hanging around there since a kid. Got good friends down there. So we use those skiffs, 16-foot wooden old-fashioned dories, basically. Those are ideal for, working with the white sharks, which showed up in 2015 in a good abundance, juveniles, even yearlings. And so, yeah, it varies from time to time as well. I spend a lot of time either doing dispatch or myself personally running to retrieve evidence, specimens, regarding strandings. We had 3 white sharks wash up dead here in Monterey Bay.
I read that
in the
on
last
your
2 years.
Facebook page, yeah.
Yeah, as well, and we published a paper, identifying the pathogens, working with Mark Akihiro, and he's the chief fish pathologist for the world. For California, he works for the Fish and Wildlife Department of California. Very respectable, impressive individual who's been able to basically have a place where we could send all these specimens. In 2011, when I first, became acquainted with him and began working with him, up until that point, it was kind of up to me to find a lab and the specialist able to look at the specimen to determine what the pathogen or injury, et cetera, the forensics work. In this case, we're working with the state, Fish and Wildlife Lab. Best pathologist around. He's a real go-getter himself. He's one of the few.
But you got this all going, so the 3 sharks that washed up. Why? How? What
Well,
have
there's
you
been
determined so far?
3, and one's still under investigation. The most recent one washed up, down by Seascape this year. Last year there were 2 washed up. One in April. It was.
What kind of shark are they?
Now there's been 3 white sharks.
White sharks.
Protected species of white sharks.
Wow.
These are they can be up to 20 feet long. Possibly more than that.
Wow.
And they're born almost 5 feet long. In this case, we had 2 in the 10-foot range wash up last year, and then another one this year, between 9 and 10 feet long, all of them. One of them has been identified with a new pathogen infection, fungal infection, not before observed in any of these species of sharks. And
what does that mean? Where might that come from, or what's happening that causes it?
Well, you hear a lot of issues about water qualities, plastics, discharge, tide gates. We've California's tidal marine estuaries are fewer than 10% of their former abundances. You hear a lot of talk about wetlands, which is the remainders of dead estuaries. But there's a lot of problems with watershed. It overlaps with salmon issues and stuff like that. It's not so much the fishing is in many of these species, hitting them with their industrial base. Rivers, estuaries, which are used for pupping, or anadromous fish need the rivers and all this kind of stuff. If you wreck that, then it doesn't really matter if no one fishes for them or not, because you have diminishing returns. And then we have this concerns with carnobacterial infections. We published.
Did you find out what happened to those sharks, those 3?
Yeah, the first one was a fungal infection.
Okay.
First of a kind. The second one was hit by a boat,
Oh.
and then after that it was stabbed, and the fin was cut off, some teeth were cut, eyes poked, that kind of stuff. So that was kind of thwarted. That one's listed as boat vessel strike.
I see.
Yeah, but it may have also had an infection leading up to being hit by the boat. Usually they're pretty good at getting out of the way. The third one is under investigation. There was foul play suspected with that. Similar shark as the first 2 from last year, and I'm not at liberty to discuss the details of that one, but it's alarming. We've had specimens wash up and get vandalized and so forth, and some people are actually it's a chronic problem in Southern California with the juvenile white sharks are very approachable, easy to hook online. They're not real smart yet, right? They're like puppies, and they get caught off the Southern California piers quite a bit.
Oh. On purpose?
Yeah, both accidental, right? Guys just trying to catch a big halibut, right? And the big shark grabs the line, or he catches a halibut and the shark wants the halibut. You know, you have those kinds of problems. You have other people that are, you can see them on video if you look on YouTube. There's quite a few of them where the people are wearing masks, you know, and
Wow.
you know, when they get the shark up on deck, they, you know, cheer, and it's quite deliberate.
What about the sharks? I mean, you know, I think last time we talked, when you were in, we talked about the sharks that getting caught by fish in the nets by accident.
Bycatch has always been a big
what's
issue.
happening with that? It seems to me I've read.
Well, you know, off the California coast, you know, in the U.S. in general, their sharks are probably best protected here than you know, anywhere else, as protected as anywhere else. But it's a hard standard to live up to, you know, worldwide. So there's a lot of places where even where gill nets are illegal, they're still being used. There's not enough enforcement. It's a vast area to cover. You know, talk to someone with the Coast Guard. You know, even a big, well, you know, supplied and experienced agency like that can't cover all that ground. They do a remarkable job. But the same thing applies, you know, logistically, practical, you know, in terms of, you know, policing the seas, you know, and that kind of thing. Shark fin fisheries have kind of compounded that bycatch problem by basically eliminating a large part of it. Again, here in California, it's banned since 2012, 2013. Yeah, it's a real problem. All compounded when you talk about a species like basking sharks. You know, they may live well over 100 years old. World's second largest known, you know, species of shark. And they are vulnerable just because they grow like a tree. You know, it takes a long time to replace them. So they're menaced by vessel strike. You know, the vessel traffic, big ships, and stuff like that. Water pollution, incidental catch. The fishery's closed. I mean, you know, a basking shark fishing boat wouldn't really be able to subsist just because, you know, there's not enough of them to find, right? They're still taking it, you know, opportunistically down in Baja. And as well, I've heard, you know, off of California as well. And then when you do catch one by accident, what's the dilemma? Do you just want to sink the thing or make use of it, you know? So yeah, these are all very complicated issues. U.S. is in a real, you know, leadership position, a lot of pressure, trying to lend the example at the same time and keep others honest at the same time without, you know, eliminating the fisheries. They're just trying to, you know, subsist themselves. So right way to do, you know, right way and time to do a lot of stuff. We've learned a lot, but in the case of, like, you know, basking sharks, they may be threatened with, you know, literal extinction, you know, at this rate, just because there's so few, far between, to live so long, takes so long to reproduce. And the numbers are so down, and then there's a lot of water pollution issues and stuff like that.
So the water pollution is a significant factor.
Oh yeah,
in all
you know,
of this.
microplastics, you know, petroleums, you know, leopard sharks, for example, in the San Francisco Bay were declared unsafe to eat by the public health and safety people. You know, they're
That's a
obligated
good
to announce
thing,
that.
right? Or,
Well, I guess, you know, the sharks are so unhealthy to eat, you know, that they may be toxic to you to eat. So you're, you know, warned basically not to.
so they survived, right? I mean,
I
isn't that the
guess
point?
so. You know, in terms of like leopard shark specific, you know, they're estimated to be fewer than 50% of their, again, former historic abundances. They don't live as long, apparently. The big 5-6 footers that are on record, you know, no one's seen 5-foot leopard shark in quite a while. Those may be 30, 40 years old as well. They have bioaccumulative, you know, pollutants, PCBs, trace organochlorines, metals, pesticide, all kinds of stuff like that. So their overall health is greatly diminished. Then on top of that, we've had, you know, mass epizootic die-offs, which apparently are
What does
on
that
the
mean, mass
increase.
epizootic die-offs?
Well, it's basically a situation where the water quality deteriorates in terms of, you know, what's good for the sharks and fish. Even striped bass, you know, have been dying in equal numbers. But it becomes very nutrient rich for, you know, protozoa, you know, and nematodes and you know, parasitic organisms and carnobacterial infections and stuff like that. And, you know, we're still looking into that. You know, you can't declare exactly what is the cause of that, but carnobacterial infections and stranded salmon sharks, for example, were almost unheard of, you know, prior to, you know, the 90s. And they're definitely increasing, and that pathogen has been
So some are
identified.
increasing, some are decreasing.
Well, not the pathogens. Pathogens all do seem to be new and improving, right? Carnobacterials are, you know, first noted in die-offs of fish at fish farms and salmon. You know, carnobacteriums have been used for about 30 years, and more increasingly so as an artificial additive preservative. And it shows up as residual toxins around fish farms where they use bulk bait, which is treated with this carnobacterium. Carnobacteriums basically eat listeria and other organisms that promote decay, decomposition. So if you add this, predator of listeria, for example, that'll diminish and slow down that decomposition process. So it seemed like a good idea. They put it in meats and stuff like that. There is a concern that it's morphed, mutated to some degree, because it's unusual that a typically benign carnobacterium would attack the host in the case of salmon sharks, which we published in 2013 on that. Paula Schaefer, lead author on that, out of Stanford, with some UCSC partners of mine. We've been collecting the specimens for years. Mark Akahiro, who I was talking about earlier, helped identify that same infection as killing off not just salmon sharks, but mako sharks, thresher sharks, and quite possibly some others. We suspected that when that first white shark washed up, and it turned out to be something additional, a fungal infection never before seen. Most of those carnobacteriums, protozoa, nematodes, and all these, epizootic, creatures flourish in the presence and abundance of dead, rotted fish. And so we have a situation, basically, as I see it, in San Francisco Bay, where there's tide gates that periodically trap significant numbers of sharks, rays, and fish. They die, it gets discharged out into the nearshore environment, thereby creating an epizootic flourish, where critters like nematodes and protozoa and fungus and all that stuff really go off. It's very good news for them, but it kills off all the other animals that come into contact with them. So then it just kind of snowballs. If you have a dead cow laying on the side of the road, you drive by a few hours later, and it's just a dead cow. You come back by 3 days later, and it's swarming with flies. So that's the analogy, is the accumulation and deposition of these dead, rotted fish in the nearshore areas, and San Mateo and Alameda in particular. There's also been periodic events, more sporadic in Oakland, Berkeley, Sausalito, Bay-wide. And then as well, we still get calls annually about animals that are trapped behind the tide gates and kind of waiting to die. If we can get there before they die, we can rescue them. But there's like a 3-day window before they start to lose their declining health, and then they just become another carcass. And so when the gates are closed, they kind of stack up. They open the gates, it discharges out into the bay, and that's how we get these epizootic flourishes. So we're right in the midst of investigating that.
Yeah, let me just take a break. Tell everybody you're listening to Universal Grapevine. I'm Bruce Bratton. My guest right now is Sean Van Sommer. We'll be back with Sean in a minute. After I tell you that, tune in to Closet Free Radio, Monday evenings from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Queer Public Affairs since 1975. It's the longest running queer public affairs show in the country, covering news and events, interviews and music, and so much more. That's every Monday night, 7 to 8:30 p.m. on 88.1 FM KZSC Santa Cruz. And now back with Sean Van Sommer. And let me ask you a basic question, because you talk more on your Facebook page and everywhere else too about tagging sharks. Why?
Yeah. Well,
why do you keep tagging them? I mean, pretty soon
it's similar to the leg tags on a bird or an ear tag on a mammal. You put a number color-coded tag on it. It's a visual cue that you can, if you visit a particular site with, like, say, a white shark or something, you can see the same shark over and over again, and it's a visual cue for identification of an individual. Further on down the line, should that animal be captured, die of a pathogen infection or what have you, wash up on the beach, again, you have a long-term record of that animal.
So why do you need a long-term record of an animal?
So you can identify them, get population dynamics, life history. That's on the most basic, aspects of it. And then there's telemetry, which is, transmitters, ultrasonic acoustic transmitters, satellite transmitters. There's a lot of really good work nowadays done with genetics, tissue sampling, isotopic analysis, that kind of stuff.
Do you have a little electronic implants that you put in?
Yeah, I'd have to show you. Basically, we do it on the end of a tagging lance. It's
Well,
basically a
I
harpoon.
mean, you do have them. I mean,
we've
not just visual.
Yeah, we've tagged a record number of sharks. You know, certainly in Monterey Bay and in the Pacific as well.
Right.
So how that works, for example, is like we tagged a blue shark in 2002 that was recovered clear across on the other side of the Pacific. And so that is, the first of a kind data point, and how that was used by us as a conservationist group. It wasn't just an academic question of, oh, look, that's very interesting and publish worthy in itself, but that's not our main motive. It proved that the blue sharks we see in Monterey Bay are pan-Pacific travelers. They go clear across the whole Pacific, just like a lot of the tunas, seabirds, etc. So the argument we were leveraging was that, heavy fishing anywhere along that route will, produce a diminishing return here in Monterey Bay, where they're not heavily fished, right? In fact, we don't see blue sharks very much anymore. I remember back in the 90s, 70s, when I was growing up, blue sharks, fishermen couldn't get away from them. You'd be rock fishing and have to pull up and move just because you have, hundreds of blue sharks all over the place. And you'd see them finning around. They're still out there, but just their abundances are clearly and demonstrably diminished, and that's because of the high seas, gill nets, and all that stuff. So it was really an urgent, pressing, issue and project to get on, tag as many blue sharks as we could at a specific point, and then wait for the tag returns. It's kind of a message in a bottle. So that's with no telemetry at all. And then with electronic, acoustic tags, like a cowbell. Basically, you can set up monitors that will listen for the tags, which are emitting a beacon. Satellite tags are so much different. It archives the information on an internal mini computer, and then will, at a predictable interval, detach from the animal, pop up, and communicate with satellites, Argo satellites, which then can communicate those to a land-based computer or phone or that kind of thing. And in all of that work, we've done records in numbers. First tag basking sharks, first tag white sharks, first tag all these other shark species in Monterey Bay. And the purpose of it was for conservation.
But the big one I wanted to talk about, I've been waiting to talk about, is the giant squid. And all that's, and the 10 years study on it, and the publications, and
that was just serendipity, at its best. I've got phenomenal luck in that one regard. I've got all my limbs and.
Tell us about it.
We were actually out on a blue shark survey. The weather wasn't that good. We had some students on board. This was back in 2008. And so at that time we were much more materially, stronger. We had, 2 boats plus the skiffs, and we would have teachers and students visit us from all over the world, coming on 10-day visits. In this case, we went out over the Monterey Marine Canyon, hoped to find blue sharks. Weather wasn't, cooperating, so we decided we'd go to the Marine Canyon edge, turn on the fathometer, and show these visitors who never been to Monterey Bay before the contours of the Marine Canyon. So we're doing that. We're slowing down. Everybody's looking at the dash, and I kind of look up, and I saw a big gaggle of birds, albatross, and a slick on the surface. So I know they don't waste time unless there's something good to eat, and they're eating something. It looked to me like a shark attack, right? Like what we'd see if a pinniped or seal got bit by a shark. So it wasn't too hard to convince, the rest of the crew, Callahan, the skipper of the boat, to drive on over there. We did. Birds parted, and then there was on the surface, an 18-foot long remnants of what was a 31-foot long Architeuthis. So I recognized it immediately. There's not too many squids that big.
Being giant squid.
The giant squid. There's there's Dasyticus, Gyges, and Humboldt squids. There's all kinds of large squid, 8-10 feet long. This thing was big, and they get much larger than this. So I immediately saw that as I couldn't believe my eyes. Right? We weren't looking for it. I just happened to stumble across the darn thing. So we pulled into the boat. Called Guy Oliver at UCSC, real good researcher I've known for years, and told him to put the calls out. And so we brought it on board. We took it back to the harbor. John Field and some other NOAA scientists were there waiting for us, all 3 of them on their phones. And we gave it to them and just said, we're going to publish a paper. I'm a co-author. This is my specimen. Do your thing. And thank you. How you doing? And from there, it has kind of it's been sequestered. It's now in the basement in Santa Barbara, The paper is going to be published, either late this year or more likely in the first half of 2019. That'll be a big one. I can't say that we had a giant squid project and we went out and succeeded. It was just literally an accident that we found this squid. But it happens to be the largest, most intact, freshest specimen of Architeuthis, actual fabled giant squid, ever collected in Monterey Bay and the Eastern Pacific.
And now this is coming out or already is in a book by Wendy Williams, The Kraken Study?
Yeah, it's been mentioned in a lot of. That's the best source. Wendy wrote a really good book. I just call her W. Williams because people get her confused with the talk show
You can
host.
find this on your Facebook page too.
Or the punk rock Wendy Williams. No relation, but really good writer. She interviewed everybody. And I recommend that. It's called Kraken by Wendy Williams. William Gilley, who's a really cool guy, scientist, actually shook my hand. He's a big squid expert, said it was a miraculous find, and asked me if I knew how lucky I was. And I think so.
And this is all the Monterey Canyon mystery.
Yeah, not a bad neighborhood to come across something like that.
But a lot has happened. I mean, it seems to me that we are seeing a lot more whales, a lot more shark, everything happening in the Monterey Bay, and of course more tourist boats and all that. Now, why are they coming up
I
here?
only speculate, right?
People don't know. I mean, after all this study, they don't know.
Look at El Nino, the El Nino theory, right? They're only able to detect these ocean, dynamics, and then incrementally kind of, there's El Nino and various, variants of that concept kind of thing. But, the currents change from time to time. I kind of hesitate to say whether it's, quote, global warming. I honestly don't know. But suffice to say, the currents have shifted in a lot of ways. There's been record abundances. It's been great for Monterey Bay of whales, killer whales, including like blue whales and, all the others that we commonly see, like humpbacks, and just really good abundances. And that includes juvenile white sharks moving into Monterey Bay beginning in 2014, 2015. We're the first to see those and identify those and announce those to the public back in 2015 after doing many years of aerial surveys. I recognized that immediately as unusual. Looking back to the records, we had them here in the 20s and the 30s. Again, those are current fluctuations. Up until around late 90s, 2000, all the juvenile white sharks and yearlings were down in Baja and further south than they are currently. So there's a reciprocal absence down in the southern end of the range, and then an apparent extension north. So again,
going toward cooler water, is that
warmer water? They go north as the water becomes more accommodating. And it could also be an influence of the abundances of fish and bait fish and things like that have attracted the humpback whales and blue whales and all the plankton, and just it's a really dynamic, unique area here in Monterey with the Marine Canyon. So there's definitely something that periodically, historically attracts these kinds of congregations, and there's never really been a better time to go whale watching. Out of Santa Cruz, Santa Cruz whale watching is super good. Moss Lane's got a lot of good boats. Monterey, of course, Nancy Black's operation is kind of legendary for their skills at finding really cool stuff. So they came to the right place.
So it's okay to go out there in these boats and mess around and.
Well, there's been to a degree. There's been announcements advising small boaters, kayakers, stand-up paddlers to stay. Don't get so close to the whales, right? They're not out to get you, but you don't take it for granted. And there have been accidents. We get kayaks, hit by sharks every year. Happened again this year. They don't always make the press. And so it's caused, in terms of the sharks, when we first announced that we saw 12 small sharks, great whites, juveniles. It was kind of got lost in the story where it was like 12 great white sharks camped out at New Brighton Beach. Don't go near the coast. That's kind of an exaggeration. And then you have the other end of this perspective where it's like, these sharks are completely misunderstood and harmless. And no, they're not. They're big sharks, and stay away from them if you can.
We have very few shark fatalities. I mean, sharks biting humans, right?
Yeah, we had one just last year in
last year. I mean, hello. Considering the number of sharks and people that are in the water at the same time.
Yeah,
one last year.
Yeah, statistically, sharks aren't biting people all day long. They could, with the presence of people and the proximity of these sharks.
Right.
It certainly caused some stirring and concern with public safety. So it's again kind of a a balancing act between protect the habitat and environmental integrity, as well protect the public from accidentally running into harm's way, that kind of thing. So you don't want people. You don't want to have people with wading out there in inner tubes to the sharks because they're convinced the sharks are completely harmless. And at the same time, you don't want people, to be fishing for them off the wharves to, cull them out because they think they're dangerous. The truth is in the middle there, but it's a very narrow, fine line to try to balance there. So there's definitely a public safety aspect. The area's been famous for white sharks for a long time. What we have here recently, for the first time since the 20s and 30s, are these juvenile yearling, including white sharks. We saw yearlings in 2015, and then again they showed up in 2018 this year. Could be coincidence, nothing solid, but that fits perfectly the reproductive cycle for white sharks. If a female had come and dropped off some yearlings in 2015, came back and did it again this year.
Yeah, so now we're out of time. So how can people get in touch and support you? And you had a donation drive, a fund drive a while back, if people want to send you something?
We're very active on Facebook. We've kind of freeze-framed our webpage back in 2008. It's kind of like a monument.
But the Facebook page
is very active.
And that's got a way that they can mail.
Yep, email me. Yeah, contact me by email, psrf@pelagic.org. As well, my mobile number, 831-454-6567. We have a lot of really wonderful opportunities for students, naturalists, people interested in perhaps, seeing their first white shark and that kind of thing. There's no better place.
Great. Good talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruce.
Glad to know our little Bay Area is still so healthy.
Yeah.
And all of those little fine things.
In many ways. Yeah, not for lack of trying, but it's still a wonderful place.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. And you're listening to Universal Grapevine. I'm Bruce Bratton, and
Thank you very much.